start with, the Namibia Financial Institution Supervisory Authority, in short NAMFISA, has received several queries relating to the draft regulation on preservation of retirement benefits to be made under the Financial Institutions Markets Act of 2021. So it's Act number 2 of 2021. And in short, this Act will refer to it as FIMA. In this regard, NAMFISA confirms that the regulation will introduce compulsory preservation of retirement benefits for people who withdraw from their retirement funds before they are old enough to retire. For example, when they change jobs or stop working. Such members will be required to preserve 75% of their minimum individual reserves, or what we can call credit funds or fund credits, until the prescribed early retirement age of 55. The main cause of concern from the public regarding the draft regulation is the fact that once FIMA comes into force on the 1st of October 2022, members of retirement funds, upon early withdrawal, will not have access to their 75% of their funds credits. And this portion must be preserved until early retirement dates as prescribed for in the rules of the retirement fund. The draft regulation will apply indiscriminately to every retirement fund registered under FIMA. And the compulsory preservation of retirement benefits will apply to all retirement benefits that become due to and to contribution made by members of the retirement funds following the date on which FIMA comes into force. The public is informed that the main purpose of a retirement fund is to gather and grow savings to provide an income to the member when he or she retires, or otherwise to the member's dependents if the member passes away. In addition, if the member becomes disabled and thus unable to work before reaching the retirement age, the retirement fund may provide such member with a disability benefit, usually in the form of monthly payments. The draft regulation will benefit working individuals by ensuring that they preserve a portion of their retirement savings through their working life. This results in more income to sustain members of retirement funds after they retire, or otherwise their dependents if such members pass away. In contrast, withdrawing retirement savings in cash before retirement and using them to meet short-term financial needs results in many people not having enough savings to take care of themselves and their needs. Thus, entirely dependent regulations under FIMA is currently at advanced stage. As such, the solicitation of comments from the industry on these standards and regulations ended on the 28th of February 2022. In the meanwhile, NAMFISA is busy considering and evaluating the comments received and, where necessary, consult further on them with industry before finalizing the standards to be issued by NAMFISA and the regulation for the Minister of Finance to consider for promulgation. The final standards and regulations will be issued in the Government Gazette, that is envisaged on the 1st of October 2022, when FIMA becomes operational. The draft regulation and standards can be accessed on NAMFISA corporate website through following the link https://www.namfisa.com.na legislative instruments. And I thank you, colleagues, for listening. That's what we were there to share with you on this regulation.
How or what studies were done? How did we conclude at the 75%? For example, if a cleaner with $100,000 in their pension should only get 25%, how did we come to that 75%? Was the livelihood of this person, the lifestyle, taken into consideration to see, like, until you are at this age, you will survive for 25% of your pension? So what studies were done and who was engaged in this? Maybe I missed it, or maybe I missed it in your speech, because this is affecting people's livelihoods. So one would expect that such decisions would have been done over a period of time, a very, very lengthy time. So maybe you can take us when this consultation started and for how long, and who was involved in these consultations. Where were they? Maybe if you could give us details of these consultations and the level of people that were consulted in society. Where are they? You said this was concluded on the 28th of February, and then you gave a website to where this information is. So how aggressive was this consultation? I mean, if you're talking about the 1st of October, that's less than 6 months before this draft could become law. So why it seems like it's something that is rushed. And then one of the, maybe you can comment on that, why we are only getting to know about this now, because for me it seems like it's a reaction. It's reactionary to what we see on social media. Was this press conference going to take place anytime soon? Why not sooner? Only after it went viral on social media. One of the questions on social media is, why is this compulsory? Why is this not optional? Maybe you could also comment on that. Those are my questions for now.
I'll just summarize them quickly, so we are on the same page. These questions around the 75%, the studies around it, and what studies were done, who was involved, the level of involvement, and the level of consultations as well. That's the first question. The second one is in terms of 28th February 2022, how aggressive were the consultations in terms of that. Also, why are we only getting the information now? It's the question that you have asked. We want to know about that. And then the last one is in terms of why is it optional and why is it compulsory?
Thank you very much for this question. The first issue regarding studies, before any regulation of standards is issued, we do a proper research. So it is informed by research. And when we do research, we include what is the best practice in the world. And I can also inform you that NAMFISA is a member of standard setting body in the pension sphere, which is called IOPS, International Organization of Pension Funds Providers. So we also benefit from the body of knowledge that sits with that organization. And we also look at what is the peculiarity of Namibia as well as a country when we considered all the studies that informed the regulation that is in the draft format. With regard to consultation on the regulation and standards started way back, if my memory serves me well, 2017, 2018, where we consulted informally with the players in the industry. And you will understand that the players in the market, in this regard the pension funds, are governed by the trustees. And the trustees are also chosen by or elected by the members themselves, as well as the sponsors, or if I may use the words, the employers. And these people are charged with the responsibility to ensure that this document that are issued to them trickles down to their constituencies, which is the members. And they were asked to provide written comments to us. And in 2017, 2018, we had face-to-face consultation with the trustees and the practitioners in one room, where we explained the rationale of the regulation. And that was the informal consultation. Since the law also provides that we need to formally consult, we gazetted the regulations or the standards, and we issued a public notice in the paper, as well as the industry players, that say, please, the regulations and standards are available on the website, and they are also in the government gazette for your input. And that was done. I had a briefing with industry players last year, where I called a briefing with the industry players and informed them that the regulations and standards are now available for input. And they were given time to respond to us and the cutoff date was the 28th of February 2022, as I mentioned, especially for the regulation, because it's going to be issued by the Minister of Finance. We make recommendation to the Minister of Finance and say, here is what the public has said, and here is the advice of NAMFISA. Please make a determination so that the regulation can be issued and can be brought into force. So consultation has taken place over a long period of time, and both in media and both with industry players. However, we take cognizance of that this thing has somehow gathered some impetus due to its importance. We still welcome additional comments, if any, so that we can make an informed decision to advise the Minister of Finance for his consideration. So it is not a rushed thing, as it was put through the question, and it's still not reactionary because we have been in the media. It's unfortunate, maybe some people never read our public notices that has been included in the media for some time now. And the people that are involved has been also received some circular letters from the registrar. Why compulsory? You would see from my speech the reasoning behind that is that we need to prepare ourselves while we still having some energy. We are still working for our retirement, that we are able to provide for our needs when our bodies are no longer be able to work or the energy has reduced, that we can still live comfortably. That is the rationale behind it. However, the final decision still needs to be made. And when that decision is made, the public will be made known, will be informed accordingly, and it will be gazetted in the government gazette for implementation. I hope I covered all your questions, sir.
I have additional things. One of my colleagues has.
I just want to follow up.
Yeah. Just one of the questions. Sorry, I did not introduce myself earlier. I'm Emil Sager. I didn't. I like the sound of my name. Yeah. So you put, Mr. CEO, you are putting emphasis on living comfortably after retirement or when our bodies can no longer sustain ourselves. What about a single person that has no child, that has no will, and has retired, and his or her wish is to travel around the world at the age of 40 and never come back again? And that person dies in an airplane crash somewhere in the world. What happens to my money then? Who gets my money? Where does it go? I don't have a will. I don't have a cat or a dog. But I have $1.5 million left from my pension. Mm-hmm. So where does that $1.5 million go?
I think it's important to take this in context. And the context is that as Namibians, we need to plan for eventualities. In an event that I'm no longer there, I should have prepared myself by saying, if I do not have dependents, therefore my wish and my will should be that my asset should be distributed in this or that manner. That's what we need to plan about. And therefore, we do not want to work on assumption that people shall die, exactly people shall die. And therefore, what we're looking at this point in time is what happens to you when you are no longer be able to sustain yourself. How will you survive? That's the premise. However, that being the case, that's why we open so that we benefit from what the public are able to say, so that we strike the balance between living comfortably and other scenarios that might come into play. So what I can advise is, as the Namibian public, let us plan our life and be sure that when we are no longer there, our assets can be distributed in the manner that we want it to be distributed.
Will this 25% clause also apply for public office bearers? Because you have the trend that members of parliament quickly resign at the end of the year and come back as a parliamentarian the next year in order that after they've resigned they can get hold of a portion of their pension. And secondly, how will this clause later blend in with a national pension fund? Thank you. Thank you, Brigitte.
Is there any other
Yeah,
questions?
I have one.
Just introduce yourself. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Franz. I work as a freelance journalist. Perhaps for me, really, I heard you mentioning best practice. I'm trying to see where you are benchmarking this, just for one to have a background check on where it's based, where it's originated, or perhaps a consultant or anybody who provided this kind of information as best practice that you are embracing now. So just, if you can just clarify that, thank you.
First question, I think it almost ties into what he asked, which I feel it's not was vaguely answered. Around really what informed that 75% reservation. I think it's not quite fair to just say, you know, we use best practices in the industry. I think it would be better if really you sort of give us considerations of those items to sort of consider really this is what we looked at. I think it's probably maybe age, life expectancy, all of those things. And then that is where you found 75%. I think again, the second one ties into what he also asked again is from the compulsory part. But this is not sort of driving towards when somebody dies. That's when I retire and I don't want to work anymore and I want to start my own business. What then? And I need such particular, we have a history, not even a history, it's a reality that funding in Namibia is somewhat of a difficult thing, and most people have been using their pension funds to kickstart of some of their own private businesses. So what then in that particular case? Third question is really, there are concerns that this sort of preservation standard was not entirely because NAMFISA is looking at really ensuring that people are well off after they retire, but sort of somewhat of what is the right word? Almost like a backfiring thing from the investment regulations. You know, NAMFISA decides where some of the pension funds need to invest it, and those assets are not returning as they need to return. And therefore, it's causing a little bit of a liquidity crunch that if then the people retire, say, at a certain age, the retirement funds themselves will not be able to pay out the people's pension funds. I think we've seen that with JPF, where that balance is really coming down. The difference between your current and your current liabilities and your current assets, what needs to be paid out and what needs, what is. Is that really the case that it's to sort of ensure that the public is well off after when they retire, or is to address the liquidity crunch aspect? Let me end there for now.
All right. Thank you very much. So we have questions from 3 media practitioners. Question from Brigitte, who was asking around the 25% and how applicable it would be for public bearers around their resignation and coming back again to the office. Brigitte also asked around how it ties in with the national pension funds. Then we had a question from France in terms of the benchmark and the practice, the best practice. Who is it that you benchmark against and how do you determine the best practice? And then we have Lazarus from the Namibian, 3 questions. Again, almost a similar question to the 75%, how we got to the 75%. What items were considered when we did that? What really formed the 75%? And then the second one is in terms of this being compulsory. What if I want to use that money for me to start a business, knowing the situation that we are in, because a lot of people use their pension to fund their businesses. The last question, which was quite an lengthy one, but really what he wants to know is, are we doing this because we want to address liquidity or not?
Thank you very much, Vicky. The pension fund for political office bearers is registered in terms of the Pension Funds Act, and therefore that act will be repealed, and it is part of FIMA, therefore they will be registered in terms of FIMA. So the same regulation will apply. So it will not be a different thing. So it's applicable to them. The issue of the national pension funds, I think this also ties back to the aim of having savings at the end of, if I may use the word, your useful life, so that you are able to sustain yourselves. Currently, we have private pension funds, and some of the members of the public are left out. And the public pension fund, national pension fund, will cater for those that are left out, with the same aim of addressing the issue of having the Namibian public to sustain themselves when they are no longer be able to work or their energy has gotten down. So it all have the same aim. The issue of what informs the best practice. One, we need to look at what is the essence and objective of a pension fund. So the essence and objective of the pension fund, as I said in my speech, is a saving vehicle that would want to assist the one that participates in when they retire, or when the unfortunate incidents may happen that can lead to disability, or when they die before the retirement age, that their dependents can also benefit. So that is the crux of the matter. And with that in mind, the International Organization of Pension Fund Supervisors sets out some principles on how to have a better pension fund. And those principles are the principles that informed our research. So if anyone would want to read that, you can go on the website of International Organization of Pension Supervisors, with how they can be supervised, managed, etc. So that's where the benchmarks are. And that's also informed the research. There was a question saying, what informed this research? Maybe I can extend this to just to shed a little bit of some light. In 2005, the life expectancy of Namibians was around 53 years. And in 2021, the life expectancy was sitting at 64 years. So we can see that the life expectancy is improving. And if we do not cater for some of those, then we'll be left with Pillar 1 pension fund, which means that the social grants that will only be obtaining from government, which I believe is not sufficient for us to cater for all our needs. So those are numbers that are there. If you want to go and Google and get statistics, you can go to the World Facts book. They'll give you that statistics of how Namibia's life expectancy has improved. And we know life expectancy for the ladies is much, much higher than this in terms of the facts. So those are some of the facts that you can look at. We no longer sitting at 53. We are now have exceeded 60. We are almost going to 65 as average life expectancy in Namibia. There is also, which I say might be a perception with regards to the funding, that at the end of the day, why this regulation has come into place is because we want to address liquidity issue in the economy. That's incorrect. And pension funds are legal entities, and the assets that they have belongs to the pension funds. And therefore, as they belong to the pension funds decide on how to invest their assets, not NAMFISA. NAMFISA only provides a framework under which the pension funds can invest the assets that they have. So we do not tell them and say, go invest in this, go and do this, go and do this. We tell them, if you play in this space and you have people's money, this is a framework under which you can operate. So within that framework, you are able to do your investment according to your appetite. So that is managed by the pension funds themselves. And the issue of that, maybe at the end of time, the pension institutions will not be able to honor their obligations. That is being mitigated through our own ongoing supervisory activities. We place prudential limits on pension funds. Say, for example, we will be comfortable if the obligation of GIPF is made one-on-one with its own assets, because by then it will be able to honor its obligations. And if that is breached, we, as the regulator, we intervene and ask or direct them to make sure that their prudential limits are observed at all times, so that at the end of the day, the obligations are honored by the pension funds. So the law provides for the regulator to take actions if the prudential limits are. So I have no doubt in my mind that when you retire, you will still have your money, and the authority will make sure that these prudential limits are observed at all times, and the decision does not hinge upon the perceived liquidity crunch in the economy. I say that as incorrect fact. So the fact remains, the essence and objective of the pension funds should be preserved at all times. So that's what I can inform the general public on the matters. I hope I answered all. Did I leave out something? Definitely you can take up that one. Maybe I didn't understand it.
I think the one question that came was on the area of research and best practices, and the CEO was alluding to the fact that we are one of the 54 members of the OECD organ that is called IOPS, as he has said. So we obviously benefit from 54 countries being represented in crafting of best practices and standards for pension funds, and how they must be supervised and what the essence of pension funds are. And within that particular context is really the question that you asked also around own businesses. The essence of a pension fund is to provide for a pension stream of income when you reach a particular age. And in Namibia, the general age of retirement is 60. We have an early retirement age of 55. In other industries, there is a retirement age of 65. And therefore, these acts and the provisions are implemented in light of the rules of the fund. So if it's a NAMFISA provident fund, which is a pension fund that we have for NAMFISA employees, they are subjected to exactly the same rules and laws. As the CEO says, a legal entity, the CEO cannot interfere, nor can I. It's led by a principal officer and a chairperson, and they do their business in line with the act as provided for. So I hear you on the concern around if I want to start my own business. Maybe there's a pocket of savings that I can go to, but what am I saving for? I think that's the first question one must ask oneself. What am I saving for? Am I saving for my old age and to have a stream of income and maybe not a more comfortable life when we are old? The idea is to sort of maintain what we are having currently. And we are saying average replacement ratio is 75%. If I, at the age of 40, is making a base rate of 100%, maybe when I'm 65 and 60, will 75% cater for that. And that's sort of where we are playing here. So I thought I just needed to just add those two.
Maybe also to add on, it's important for us to note that there are so many avenues to save money for a particular purpose. So whenever we do want to save money, let's look at that particular vehicle, whether it caters for the need that I have in mind when I'm doing my savings. That is quite crucial. So the essence of the pension fund, as I have said, is to provide for the person when they retire or when they become disabled or when they pass away, their dependents can benefit from it.
Right. I think I'll take 2 or 3 more questions. I see Lazarus and his up. And you also there's a question entry to that. So Lazarus, you can go first.
After the mic.
Oh, you have the mic.
Madam Moranda, I don't think it's fair when we are subjected to being told there's only 2 more rounds of questions. Although it's maybe the CEO is busy, but I think this is a national issue, and we should be accorded if we have questions instead of calling back or arranging another press conference again. As the CEO, the media invite said clarity on the perceptions of what is going on, what is being posted on social media. I think it's safe to say that the conversation was started after the former mayor posted on his social pages about this. I don't see a clarity use, and it is also safe to confirm that the CEO says you consulted with stakeholders, which are the trustees. Neither or at no point did NAMFISA go into the regions, went to a community hall and said, can employees or pension people that have pension come to this hall? We want to speak to you about this. So these consultations were done in boardrooms with people wearing suits, and the onus was on them to go and consult their people who are the groundbreakers. So did NAMFISA ever go under a tree in Umsati, in Erongo, in Vietnam, with their banner and said, employees with pensions, please come, we need to talk to you. Announced it on the language services. How many language services? I know National FMO, NBC has about 13 radio stations, was time bought or time asked to say, we need to speak about this, we need to consult, call in, tell us what you think. Or like you confirmed, it was only with trustees in boardrooms behind closed doors and said, you go and tell your people, we put it in paper. We don't know how many of our employees are literate that can read or have access to internet. The other one is NAMFISA prepared should this not be accepted. I don't know whether the working class has an option to accept or not, but should a court case emanate from this, is NAMFISA ready to go to court and defend this? To give you also the question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hear the passion in my colleagues' questions, and it seems that the Namibian population needs mind shift about what their pension they pay in actually needs. It is not a way to get a payout to start a business at 65 or 67. Because it will hit all of us. In the better off population percentage will in 10, 20 years probably not have enough money to cater for pensions. You need, these days, you need 3.5 to 4 million somewhere in a kitty to live 20 years or 25 years after you've turned 60, and none of us have that. And so the National Pension Fund seems to also become very urgent. But I've got two little questions. The one is on Emil's question. Will NAMFISA actually consider having town hall meetings or meetings under retreat in all the regions? It's becoming very necessary after following some of the debates on social media to really reach the people in the overalls and people who do the work with their hands. My second question is, with the 75% of a pension money which now has to remain locked up until one reaches their pensionable age, the pension funds now will sit with a lot of money they have to invest. And they have to invest a big percentage in Namibia. And the private sector normally says there are no investment opportunities in Namibia to invest money in and to get a good return on the investment on behalf of the members of the pension fund. How do you see now this flood of available money which needs to grow so that we all can have a pension? Thank you.
Maybe let me just okay.
Yes. Two questions. You sort of asked the last questions you asked. I sort of wanted to talk to that as well. Yeah, because truly, this is a dictate where pension money needs to invest in that framework of business, and where I think that was the question I was trying to talk to.
Sorry, not, I cannot see. I don't know about the rest of the room.
Maybe it's a must.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like what Belinda said, it was really to talk to that aspect where you say, NAMFISA does not direct pension funds where to invest, but provides a framework. But that framework obviously comes with sort of limits on where the pension funds can invest. So that in essence, my view is still them directing sort of in the way where to invest. Because that question also came up around, you just look at the way the money is spent and invested in the economy. My other question is really still going back to the whole liquidity aspect. There are some of the people that are sort of advising people to take out, sort of retire now, do whatever they can, resign and try and access their pension funds before the envisaged 1st of October when the regulations, if they can, or if they tend to become effective, that they by then would have submitted all they can, and then that will cause, I think, serious mass exodus from what I think, in my view, the pension funds, if such people actually go through with that, will be able to pay out. Is that a concern for NAMFISA? And I think maybe the very last question is just looking at, I think maybe it might be too early, but I think you probably have an idea from your consultations is sort of this particular regulation. Was it welcomed by industry? And those were there any sort of inputs that are sort of opposing that it shouldn't be that way? And I think also sort of just a sub question to that as well is within the region, which other country sort of has imposed that mandatory or compulsory percentage on how much can be taken up when one sort of retires. And sort of, and where do we sort of sit with those countries as well? I think
yeah.
One more question.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you once again. I think perhaps for me, maybe just at the legal point of view, the legal text, and maybe just also the philosophy. Is it the view of NAMFISA to say you are crafting a law that only seek when you retire, that's the time you would have the right to get that saving or that holding or that contribution? Is that the framework we are crafting the law, that this law, you can only get this benefit once you retire? I'm trying to understand is the legal framework and the philosophy of that, seeing that really, if we have to transform society, we have to be current. And the current is the situation that people are experiencing at the moment, the difficulty people that are going through. I'm just trying to see if we don't give people the right or privilege to offset some of this burden that they have with extracting a few percentage from their contribution or from their holding that have been. So I'm trying really to understand something in that in that kind of framework. Maybe in terms of crafting the law, because for me, I believe in people power, the will of the people, and I don't think to try to reform or to push a law that only envisage you at a certain time without understanding your ongoing contribution, and at one time in life having that privilege to say, okay, I have a bit of contribution, this is my case now, could I extract this much? I'm trying to see the framework of the law, if it gives latitude to that kind of scenario. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll summarize the questions again. Please, to the practitioners, first of the news, who made reference to the fact that you were called to this media briefing so that you can give clarity. We referred and asked if clarity was provided for during this session. Secondly, a mail spoke around stakeholders and consultation. The stakeholders were the consultants for the system done in boardrooms, and how the consultations were done. The other one that was asked is in terms of should a court case emanate from this? NAMFISA going to the mail asked. Then we had Brigitte. Brigitte largely spoke around the purpose of the pension and the importance thereof, and how it should then be tied to the national pension funds. Brigitte also suggested, and actually was worried, that public engagement should happen, more consumer education needs to be done at grassroots level. Brigitte further asked around the 75%, if the pension funds if there's a lot of money, and the pension fund sits with a lot of funds, what will be done with this money, seeing that she says there are not enough investment opportunities within the country. So this flood of money, in her own terms, where will it go? And then Lazarus came. I'm a good storyteller. Lazarus asked a few questions as well. Lazarus wanted to know, if NAMFISA does not direct the framework, who is then directing, or how are we directing? He made reference to Regulation 13 and how that then affects the law. He came back again to the liquidity aspect. Remember, he asked that question earlier, and asking that, are we aware, or do we know that people are advising other people to get up their money before the 1st of October, so that you can use your pension or what other wish you use to use it? And then he's concerned about the next exodus. Lazarus also said, when we consulted the industry, what were the industry's views? where there is some oppositions from the industry in terms of that. And then France, who believes strongly in people power, wanted to know what is really the principle of the law. That's how I summarize it. And what is really the purpose of the law from NAMFISA side. Thank you, Mr. CEO.
Thank you so much. The first question of saying whether there's been a clarity provided. I listened to the video clip of the former mayor. What was incorrect in what he said was that government has already decided come 1st of October, it will be 75 that will be preserved. That is incorrect. The regulation is still in a draft form, and the regulation, we have received formal input from industry, which is being considered. Once those are considered, and then we will advise government and say, this is what the public is saying, and this is what best practice is saying. Therefore, you policymakers make a determination. So a regulation will be issued by the minister, and therefore it is incorrect to say it is now cast in stone. It's not so, because we will advise government based on what we will receive, and then government will make the determination on that. So that should be very clear. So that is different from what the mayor said. And also, the difference between what the mayor is saying and what we are saying is we are informing the public that the pension fund has its own purpose and objective and essence. And its essence is different from what the mayor is saying. So its essence is to provide for its members upon retirement or when they have unfortunate incidents of disability, or when they pass on before retirement, then their dependents should benefit. That is the essence to which a pension fund is created for. So we are just giving facts of what the issues are, so that members of the public can make an informed decision on what they have heard from social media and what is the correct version of what is happening at this point in time. And the correct version is, it is a draft regulation. Policymakers. And also when we come to the issue of where the mayor also said that there was no consultation that took place. Also very incorrect. The correct issue is that we had numerous consultations with the trustees. As I have said, that the trustees are elected by the employers and elected by the members. And the trustees have judicial responsibility of duty to speak to their constituencies, those who have appointed them and elected them, solicit their views. And those views that they have been bringing to us, that should be the views of their constituencies, which is the members. And also the trustees do make member education sessions with the members. And these matters are also discussed in those education sessions. So therefore it is incorrect to say no consultation that was made. So those consultation was made. So those are the points of clarification to say that this is what has happened. Therefore, let's inform the public correctly what happened, other than telling them things that has not happened. So what has happened is what I have told you. So the trustees have that judicial responsibility to speak to those who have elected them or appointed them. And they do that through member education, solicit ideas, because whenever a draft regulation is given out, they go to their members and speak to their members and say, this is what is being proposed, what is the view, what are we taking to the table? And that's what they have brought to the table. Maybe at the same point I can answer Lazarus' question of saying, what was the reaction of the industry regarding 75-25 split? They welcomed the idea, given that they know what is the essence of a pension fund, and therefore they welcomed the idea, even public at large. So that's what has happened. There was a question that says, if there is a court case, will NAMFISA go in defense? I do not see any court case that will emanate for a regulation that is still in a draft form, because we are still in this public discourse. And once the public discourse is finalized, and when the decision is made, maybe it's when we can talk about what court case can be. And given that the regulation is issued by the minister, is the minister willing to defend that court case? So it's not our regulation, we are advising. So the minister will advise whether he's willing to defend that position if he takes this split as it is currently. Therefore, it is whether he has that appetite to defend, or whether he will be persuaded by the comments that has been received from the public and make amendments to the regulation so that the regulation is issued for implementation, because NAMFISA just implement the regulation after it has been promulgated. So we will implement what the policymakers will agree upon and give to us and say, go and implement, then we shall implement. So as for NAMFISA is willing to defend, we do not have anything to defend. So we still advising. And with regard to, when we look at retirement, let's look at this, that the long-term impact of what lack of savings would be on the Namibian society. That's a good discourse that we need to discuss ourselves as the Namibian public. Therefore, when we look at retirement funds, we need to look at that. We do not need to look in the short term, so we need to look into the long term. Maybe coming back to whether NAMFISA will go to the town halls and discuss that, I think I have responded that in view of that, you will agree with me that we have done our part to consult, and we believe that the other parties have done so. And if they haven't done so, let them go back to their constituencies and bring those, because we're still having this interim period for us to be able to report back to the minister, so that we can get that input from the public through their organized bodies, like the trustees, and if they have consumer lobbying groups, let them do so, so that we can look at that and we advise the minister appropriately, so that we can do. In terms of the framework under Regulation 13, what we are saying here, Regulation 13 advocates for diversification, that pension funds should diversify their investments, and that is the philosophy. And we have put up the ceilings in terms of what, if they go in certain class of assets, they shouldn't exceed a given threshold, so that as an old adage goes, don't put your money or your eggs in one basket. And that's the philosophy that is underpins Regulation 13, is diversification. Therefore, they have a choice to choose from all the classes of assets and say, where will I put my money? And there is what is being said here now regarding unlisted investment and saying that there is limited investable assets. It's a debatable issue. And therefore, as patriotic Namibians, we need to look at it with a bigger picture in mind. And the bigger picture of benefit. That is the bigger picture that we need to look at. And there might be some economists around the table. Some economists believe that supply follows demand. So if the opportunities are made available, they will be grabbed and be utilized. And we have seen from the data that we have gathered that unlisted investment has culminated into creating job opportunities to the Namibian public, which was not created before. And the data is available. And I spoke at one conference, I shared that data on how unlisted investment has created job opportunities in the Namibian economy. And therefore, it is important for us to look at the rationale behind a certain given regulation, where we want to, how can we maximize the utilization of our savings for our benefit as the Namibian society. And that's the noble policy that government has come up with. And therefore, we are all being challenged to look at those opportunities and utilize those opportunities so that we can grow our economy.
So maybe there's one question that I think license is asked, which is very important. The question around a potential mass exodus, and that really worries us, and that's why we are here today, to sort of stem that and to explain where we are coming from and where we are in terms of the process. Our plea is that the Namibian public do not go and resign prematurely, that they keep their employment. We know what employment rates are in Namibia, so we cannot go for short-term gratification in lieu of a long-term benefit. That we cannot do it, and I am happy with what Richard has said earlier on around the essence and objectives of pension fund. We are here to plead with our Namibian populace and those that are employed in this market that resigning in the short term because of this regulation would be the wrong thing to do. We do not want them to do that. It's a regulation that is in draft stage. There's consultations that are ongoing. We do not know how it will turn out. But be where it may, it is definitely going to be the wrong thing to do, to resign prematurely. The other question that was raised was on the issue of who else in the region is doing that. And you would know, if you're following us quite closely, that even with Regulation 13, Namibia was one of the first movers. We were the ones that went to IOPS and said, this is what we have done in our region, and other countries has followed. I think we are also one of the front runners in terms of this particular regulation. We know that South Africa is moving, and South Africa has started work in that regard. But again, we are one of the front runners in this particular instance. But our plea really with the public that is listening, and for the media, is to carry the message around. There's no need to panic. There's no need to resign. There's no need for mass exodus in terms of leaving workplaces. They will be against the individual members and employees of entities in this economy. So I would really caution against that strongly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Erna.
Just a question, just a final question.
There were still a few more questions, but you may ask, so since it's your day.
Yeah, actually it's just a follow-up to the story that first of all, my name is Joseph Ilonga, and I'm from One Africa TV. It's just a follow-up to a story that we published, I think, a week ago, where a member of parliament from, I think, the PDM raised a concern regarding public officials who are entitled to receive several pension payouts because they serve in various positions. But just looking at this new FIMA Act, does NAMFISA perhaps have the powers to just include a simple clause that can just limit public officials who are entitled to receive multiple pensions for serving in various key positions of government? Like, for me, what I understand from this act is really just going to benefit the people at the top. But how can you also sort of like manage how these people at the top also have, really access, to like these pension funds just because they serve in various key positions of government? So does NAMFISA have the...
Thank you. Maybe we can take that one first because it's still fresh on the press. What I can say is that NAMFISA is a creature of statute. And as a creature of statute, there are certain acts that we administer. And in terms of the acts that we administer, we're only looking at the pension funds that are registered with NAMFISA. But what you have raised is an important national question that we can research on as the authority and advise the minister. But in terms of our laws that we administer, it's outside our scope. So, but thank you for that hint of saying, please can you research on this? And maybe you can influence public policy. So we welcome that value addition. So that's what we can say on that one. Because if you look at pension, there's different pillars. So those different pillars, the pillar that we are looking at is this pillar where we have private pension funds that are registered with NAMFISA, and that's what we regulate. So, but thank you for that intervention. There was the last question that came from my colleague there regarding whether the regulation, which is premised on 2575, whether it's a correct split or not, and people power. You see, if you look at how FIMA is crafted, it's crafted in such a way that before NAMFISA issues any regulation, we are obliged to consult, and therefore people's power comes into play, that people have their say through their constituencies, elected people, so that those need to be taken into consideration before the final regulation is issued. So that gives us comfort. Whether it will be 25-75 split, I do not know, because this is still under discourse at this point in time, and the determination will be made by those who need to make those determinations. We shall advise and say, this is the best practice, this is what the Namibian public are saying, and this is how the regulation looks like at this point in time. So here are all the facts. So please make your evaluation and consideration and pronounce yourself on this matter. That's where we find ourselves. I somehow did not understand the question correctly. If I did not understand it correctly, please, I encourage you to maybe to ask it again, especially the people power question.
No, I think you did well. Yeah, you did well. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Lazarus has one question.
I've received two questions.
Okay, Lazarus has a question. If you can give him the attention. Thank you.
I received two questions in text. One is really from a good friend of mine that is working in the she or he is not of Namibian origin. And she's particularly asking, so what do you want to do next year? What happens to you? That's one question. And I think that is probably also think maybe to add on to that, there's sort of the 25-75% split come with some conditions. So this is only applicable if you see in the happens. If you stay in Namibia, if you are Namibian, if you intend on doing, I don't know, because I think it would be very unfair. I mean, just considering this particular one particular case. And also, how does it factor into this asset-backed, like pension-backed assets, the loans, where you take out the house and then you use your pension to back it? What happens if you default? Because ideally, the lender will go after your pension, and then now you say you only pay 25%. Will that still be a sort of a use of it? How does that then play out, I think, in the whole lending space? And then one last question is, when people want to receive it from 2 or 3 people, they say they want to have a look at that study and that conclusion that you made, the one that made it final.
Alright, for first questions again, you were responded to,
Yes.
that you were happy, yes, and then Lazarus is a question in terms of somebody who is not a management original house is going to pay out this draft regulation. And also in terms of are there any conditions which the 25-75 split, or is it just the way it is? Also in terms of pension-backed assets, if you default, what will then now be the collateral given this draft regulation? And then also the paper, the research paper, will be made available.
Thank you. I think that was you brought in a very a good question regarding alternate expatriates, that people come in a country to come in, impart skills, and after a short while they leave. Currently, how the regulation is crafted did not distinguish those. These are value-add concerns that we would like to have when we are considering this regulation to enrich it. So this is an important question. There are many of other important questions, value-add that we have received that can also be considered. While we are considering this regulation, these are some of the things that we would welcome, so that we apply our mind appropriately to these circumstances, so that we can see how the regulation can be tweaked, so that we can advise the minister on it. With regard to pension-backed loans, this still remains as it is currently. It's not tempered by this regulation. So unless if there's anything else under that, but the pension-backed provisions still remains as it is. This one is only to say, in an event you want to leave the area, this is only what you can access. You cannot access more than what is stipulated in the regulation. So, but for now, if you're still a member of the pension fund, you can access the pension-backed loans with all the rules of the funds apply as it is applying for now. With regard to the excess, sorry.
Default, I think the question was related to that.
Yeah, when the default will depend on two ways, whether you are defaulting when you are still a member of the pension fund. When you are still a member of the pension fund, I think the rule of the pension fund caters for that. If you are no longer a member of the pension fund, then they should be what the rules specify when you are no longer a member of a pension fund, that you had a pension-backed home loan. So there's a way of recovering that money from you, because what that the rules of the pension funds provides for those. So there's a way of how to deal with it in the pension fund. With regard to the studies, normally our policy documents are not shared publicly. There are those that are for public consumption. There are those that are in-house consumption and consumption for the policymakers. Therefore, it's difficult to say where this study falls now that maybe I have made it public. I cannot commit to that because we have what is compelling us to keep confidentially and what we can share with the public.